Thank you very much, Freddy Murstad, for coming on the podcast.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
Uh, you are a senior threat analyst at NF CERT. So you work with threat intelligence, is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. Try to support the finance sector in protecting themselves against both financial fraud and also other threat actors trying to breach their systems.
You have a very impressive background. I've just checked your resume on LinkedIn and wondered if you could elaborate on your journey, so to speak. How did you start out in this field, and what has led up to your position today and the work that you do?
Yeah, so my background, I spent about 17 years in the Norwegian Armed Forces, mostly, well, seven of those, I guess, with intelligence. So I'm an all-source analyst at heart, but also a single-source analyst and had specialties, of course, that I work with. So in I don't know, in 2011 we had a terrorist attack in Norway, and that led me to try and figure out why terrorists or seemingly normal people would elect to become a terrorist. So I did a master's degree in counterterrorism to try and figure out the radicalization process. And once I was done with that, or just before I was done with it, I figured out, well, now I know the radicalization process, but what can I do with that? So I took another master's degree in intelligence, and there I focused on cyber and how threat actors are using the internet, to hide their tracks, basically operational security or OPSEC. So I spent some time researching how the development had been from the 80s and 90s all the way up to 2014, 15, when I was writing my second master's. And then I went back into the military again, and of course, they worked more with those fields. And then in 2018, I started working at NFCERT, the Nordic Financial CERT. It's a nonprofit. We work or are owned by the finance sector, and as I said initially, we help them defend against threat actors who try to breach the systems or defraud either them or their customers. But at the same time, I'm also doing a PhD and working on researching actually the intersection of intelligence methodology, how intelligence cycle, intelligence process can be applied to cyber threat intelligence. And most people who do CTI are focusing on the C, the cyber, and it's really technical. But my job is basically to try and figure out, well, what are we learning from this? What are the key aspects? How can we turn this data, this information, and previous intelligence into decision support, reducing uncertainty, and working with decision makers and helping them understand how they can take advantage of that type of information and intelligence. And that sort of those were the two things, right? Intelligence and also CTI. But also I elected to include artificial intelligence. So how does artificial intelligence help us do analysis and intelligence better so it can support CTI better? That's sort of the angle I'm working on. So it is intelligence supporting CTI, and then how AI might support that function again. And of course, I'm at my sort of, I have multiple hats, but the third one is I run my own little company where I deal with and teach, I guess, intelligence to cybersecurity people. And mostly I teach how to do analytical tradecraft. And specifically, that's structured analytical techniques. How can you take a problem, externalize your thinking, and then use that knowledge to do better analysis and actually come to better conclusions, I guess you could say. That's a very short explanation on a much longer and more complicated route.
Wow, that's a lot of different initiatives and a lot of different things going on at the same time. I mean, taking a PhD while also working at the NF CERT and also your project with intelligence tradecraft. How do you make everything work together, I guess?
It needs to, I need to have a really good family, which I have, and also a really good boss, which I also have. So basically, I work at NFCERT, but I only work there 50%. So 50% of my time, I work at Nordic Financial CERT and write the reports and do the analysis. The other half of my year or time, if you will, I work at the university. So they're paying me there to do the research. So a 3-year PhD will now take me 6 years. So I'm in my second year, which means I only worked 1 year PhD time, but 2 years, in the mix of the 50%. I know it's confusing, but it doesn't matter. The point is to get everything working well as an oil machinery, if you will. You need to have a really good support system. You need to have a really good boss who lets you do it, and also are a little, what do you call, fluid, I would say. And sometimes I work more there, sometimes I work more there. But at the end of the year, we calculate everything and figure out, well, we worked like 49.7%, and then a little bit more on the other. Then we adjust the next year, etc. So we can make it work, but it requires. In Norwegian we say smidig. Agile is the English word for it. So you really have to be agile, and everyone around you as well. So I appreciate my boss at NF So thank you again.
Very nice. You need to be able to context switch a lot with that many hats on, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So for the listeners of this podcast, they might be a bit less familiar or more familiar with some fields within intelligence. So maybe we should just take a step back. You work with threat intelligence. So what do you put in the word intelligence? How does threat intelligence work? And what's up with cyber threat intelligence?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked, because this is one of my pet peeves. In Norwegian, we say kjepphest. But okay, so in my world, I come from the intelligence side, and intelligence has a subset called threat intelligence. It focuses on the threat, it focuses on their intent, their motivation, their capabilities and capacities, but also their opportunities. That's sort of the baseline for what a threat is. So threat intelligence is basically focusing on the threat actor, and what are they capable of, what are the sizes and volumes, what is their training, also what is the intention, motivation, as I said. So threat intelligence is actually threat intelligence for everything, right? It isn't just whatever you pick and choose. It is actually, now suddenly we have geopolitics, we have travel, we have insiders, we have whatever the case might be, physical security. That means threat intelligence is supposed to support all that. In cyber is a subset of security, and then we have cybersecurity, and below that we have a subset again called cyber threat intelligence. So basically what cyber people did is they looked at intelligence and they pulled the sweet spot of threat intelligence, slapped the cyber on it, and now, lo and behold, we have cyber threat intelligence. Now, in the cyber community, they call it TI, threat intelligence, or CTI, cyber threat intelligence, and they intermix those terms. I've been trying to say, well, if you say TI, you mean intelligence for all threats, regardless of if it's cyber or not. If you say CTI, that means it's specifically for cyber. So, but yeah, this is a term that has been thrown around, very very easily, I would say, and then, with no concern of what it actually means. And, from an analytical perspective, we have to be clear on what we mean when we say this, what we mean when we say that. And that means we can do good analysis and we have a common understanding what we mean. So, so that's one of my pet peeves in terms of separating the three. So, going back to your one part of your question, intelligence is about figuring out, or let me rephrase. Intelligence is decision support. That's what we talked about initially. And it is also about reducing uncertainty. And it's also about providing opportunities. So whatever the problem, the question, or the uncertainty you have, intelligence is supposed to help you make decisions, or at least put you in a position where you can make as good as a decision you can with available information. And then also, if you're uncertain about making decisions or choices, having the decision support is one thing, but also reducing uncertainty, reducing friction. And while having those two, you can also then start opening up the aperture and saying, hey, well, this is happening, this is a threat, but actually it's actually giving us opportunities. While they are doing this and we know it, we can start planning for, preparing for, or counter whatever thing that our threat actor that we're tracking or whatever threat scenario we're discussing happens, right? So it's mapping out and understanding a lot of complexities to figure out how to deal with it. Now, intelligence usually are three parts. We can talk about the intelligence product. That is the intelligence you read or I present to you, or is the process of generating the intelligence that results in some sort of product, whether it's a presentation, a PDF, a PowerPoint, whatever the case might be. And then we have the program, which is the overall function. Why are we here? So a CTI program, in my mind, is what the reason we're here and what we're doing. Management is giving you money to sit down and do intelligence to support them, but also support the rest of the organization. So that's sort of the intelligence. I'm really simplifying now. It's much more complex than this, but yeah, you'll get the gist. Yeah.
So guiding decision making and also making opportunities more visible. I guess some use cases here might be to, I guess, mitigate risk or prioritize what kind of risks you need to mitigate, and looking at the chance of an event occurring. I also heard CTI and cyber threat intelligence being thrown around in different contexts within detection, very technical within cyber. So what are some other uses for cyber threat intelligence specifically, and what kind of different types of cyber threat intelligence exist?
So you're touching upon some interesting points here because, as I said initially, the CTI, most people who do CTI focus on the C, the cyber, the technical, and that's traditionally where CTI has been. So when I came into the private sector in 2018, late 2019, everyone was talking about, what are the indicators? I need all the indicators. I need all the emails. I need all the IP addresses. I need all the domains so I can know everything, so I can protect against everything. Now, all of that is automated. So we start trying to, we're seeing a shift where we're going a little away from the technical and more into the tactical. Well, who is doing what? What are the campaigns? What is the methods? What is the behavior? So that's the tactical level. So we went from technical to tactical, and we look more at the behavior of threat actors, behaviors of campaigns. We create clusters, and based on those clusters, we can say that if we see initial behavior, and then we can start to look at, well, what are then the expected behaviors to follow, so we can jump forward and start stopping the rest of the behavior, if you will, that we expect from certain threat actors operating in certain sectors, targeting certain critical functions. The next, and that's where I work, that's the operational. So we went from technical to tactical to operational. Operational is operationalizing the strategy. So from strategic, we have usually the CISO, the chief risk officer, and the board. They have certain needs. I translate those into the technical, and help and support those who are working at CTI level, either same as I am, operational or tactical, the lower, where they're focusing more on the incidents and all the indicators, but also the behaviors, looking more at, well, what are the campaigns that are running from these threat actors that are more relevant to us in our sector, in our region, i.e. Norway, for instance, or in the Nordics where I work, towards the finance sector. And then working together with both the tactical people, but also with the chief risk officer and CISO, explaining how this connects. What is the actual threats to the organization? How does that affect their defensive posture? They take that and discuss, well, these are our actual threats to our actual assets. These are the vulnerabilities that these threat actors can actually influence. And then this can influence the value, if you will, of their organization, whatever they do. A bank, their main focus or function is to enable you and I to pay for our services, to buy food. That's, at a very high level, that's what they do, and that's what we're protecting. We're not protecting money per se, but we're protecting the ability to actually receive and send funds. That is the function we're supporting. And when I was a kid, I'm 51 years old. When I was a kid, I went to a bank. I had a physical bank book that I gave to the person behind the counter, and they wrote in the number I had in my bank account. And years later, they had the printers. They put in a printer, and zit, 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 I got my bank account, whatever the money I had in account. These days, you are hard pressed to find a physical location where you can meet a person. Everything is digital. Everything is on our phones, and everything now is cyber, if you will. It's IT. And a bank where they had physical location, now everything is digital, so they're more like a IT company, if you will. They're developing apps, they're making services online, and everything is moving to the cloud. So it's so much more digital today than it was 40 or 50 years ago, to be frank.
So the focus is maybe shifting more towards cyber threat intelligence from traditional threat intelligence, or do you feel like both still have their place? For, let's say if you're a bank, for example, or a financial organization, which of these would you, how would you use each of them, I guess?
Yeah, so I don't work at all with geopolitics. I don't work with physical security. So usually, a big bank has, or a big organization, regardless of bank, a big organization usually is more mature. They have the funding and the option to hire people. And historically, what I've seen at least is that a lot of big organizations have a team or a person that has been focusing on physical security or focusing on geopolitics and how that would affect them if that organization had offices or business or production in other parts of the world. CTI or cyber has come in like the not well, it's a Norwegian term like the bastard child, where it has grown in the last 6 years or 7 years I've been doing it, where it has become more and more relevant. And certainly after the invasion by Russia into Ukraine, organizations started asking more questions about, well, what does it mean for us? How can this affect us and whatever main task we are there for? Like as I said, with finance is to enable us to be able to pay and receive funds. Whatever out there can threaten us in cyber, that has exploded, I would say, because more and more organizations have either a CTI function internally, not full time, perhaps, maybe 20%, 50% of a certain role is also supposed to focus on CTI, which was not there when I started. CTI was something everyone talked about, but didn't actually know how to do. And most people were technically focused and focused on, as I said before, all the indicators and IOCs and feeds, etc. Now it's been more of, well, how can we turn this into decision support? How can we elevate the knowledge so it can be relevant to more people around the organization rather than should I block this IP or not? It's more of, well, what does it mean for us if this threat actor targets us? How can that actually turn into an event, and how much money can we lose, or what about the reputation, or can it actually block people's ability to receive or send funds? Those are the type of questions we're getting these days, and that's a different. It requires a different skill set to actually service those type of questions. You can't, meet the board and present a malware analysis or a link chart combining whatever someone said on Twitter or X, and then how that relates to a group. They're like, that doesn't help us much. How does that affect us? What are the costs, potential costs? What are the potential savings? What are the potential opportunities? What is the risk score? They turn to this chief risk officer, and that's my biggest my nearest and dearest friends are the chief risk officers and the CISOs, because they are the ones that turn my intelligence into decision support for the board or for the rest of the C-suite or management.
Hmm. It's very interesting to hear about the strategic view with the CTI. From me personally, I've been mostly familiar with, I guess, the very technical, all the way down in the IOCs, as you say, or indicators of compromise, the traces of that maybe a threat actor is in a system, or maybe also the tactical, where you gather, I guess, articles and intelligence feeds and aggregate it and so on. So how does the life process, the life cycle of cyber threat intelligence look like from different kinds of cyber threat intelligence? I guess you have to gather something, you have to formulate it, and then you also have to deliver it, make sure it's actionable, and so on. So, what's your take on how does the life cycle look like for this process?
There's a lot of discussion actually about this because I follow what's called the NATO standard. It's the intelligence cycle. So remember, I said we had Intel product, Intel process, and Intel program. So in terms of turning something into intelligence, you have to follow some sort of process. A lot of people who are they are probably traditional intelligence people who are not used to working with cyber, and to them intelligence cycle, it's obsolete, it's old, it was created in the 40s, you can't possibly adapt it to today, everything happens so fast. And my counter to that is, in cyber, yes, everything happens really fast. However, you need to know who needs support for what. How are you going to service that person? How are you going to turn that information that you need into intelligence, and how are you going to share it? Those are basically the first part of an intelligence process, which is called direction. You have to know who you're supporting for what and at what time, all of those things you need. Otherwise, you will just spinning in your seat and chasing the headlines of today. You have to prioritize who you're supporting with what type of information and data so you can generate intelligence that's valuable to them. Once you know this, you can start figuring out, well, what do I have of information? What do I need? And what is missing, i.e. the intel gaps. Now we're into collection and collection management. That's the second part of the intelligence cycle, if you will. That's where you figure out, do I have access? Do I need to develop access, buy something, break something, whatever, to gain access to that data and information so I can actually answer the questions I'm focusing on. Once you know this, you have to process all the data and everything, and that happens as in cyber, you process everything as you work with it. I have never, ever, ever collected the IP without checking the background of the IP, the history of the IP, if there are any domains connected to it. That happens as we collect. That's part of the collection, so processing happens there. Now, in the traditional intelligence cycle, there is a step called processing, where analysis is a subset. We call that today the analysis step. But processing happens there too, and that's preparing for whatever question you're working on. You have to maybe combine Excel sheet with a database with open source and combine it into something that you can do analysis on. Either, if you do link chart analysis, if you do MITRE table comparisons, or if you use the unified kill chain or diamond model, whatever models you use in cyber, you have to make sure that you have the data available and you can actually put them into some sort of tool or some sort of Excel sheet or something online to create whatever spreadsheet or analysis you need to do. Then as you work, you start writing the report, you finish the report. Once you're done with this, you move to the next step, which is called dissemination. Dissemination is spreading. We have to then go back to direction and figure out who are we sharing what with, why did they need it, how is what I now have generated actually supporting them, do I need to make some adjustments, and then adapt whatever data, information, or intelligence I'm going to share with them to their needs. In cyber, we do a lot of automation. So if there is an incident in one organization, through sharing platform called MISP, we share every indicator immediately. There is a human who has touched that information before they share it, made an assessment, and published it. So that means the rest of those people who are connected to that MISP, they can actually automate their defenses. So if you get a phishing email now, within 5 minutes, you have analyzed it, or let's say 15 minutes. And then after that, you can hit send, and then seconds later, it's spread to hundreds of organizations across multiple countries. That's the power of automation and sharing, but we put a human in the loop so we are sure that we don't get messy data in there. So suddenly we don't block your ability to Google, your ability to get online by doing blocking like DNS 8888, for instance. We don't want that to happen. So two parts that I haven't talked about right now is so those four parts, the direction, collection, analysis, and dissemination, that's how you produce intelligence. But that's part of a bigger thing called the program, right? That's where we figure out why are we here, who are we working for, what is the value. That's the feedback part. We need to be able to provide some sort of justification that we don't fall into the intelligence paradox. The intelligence paradox is we were wrong because we were right. What that means is, let's say we through our intelligence you do everything right, but then nothing happens because we did everything right. We used intelligence, we used our skills, and we blocked every attempt. Then nothing happens. What decision makers often then do is, well, since nothing happens, why are we paying you these $100,000 or millions of dollars? Because nothing happened. That's the intelligence paradox we also see in the intelligence community as a whole. We're spending a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of resources to make sure that nothing happens. So everything is connected. You asked for different levels. There are no different levels there. You use intelligence and methodology and also the intelligence process from, I would say, tactical and up. At the technical, we automate as much as we can, and we're also heavily starting to automate everything in terms of the technical, because we can multiple organizations can collaborate and figure out, well, what is the operational behavior? What are the behaviors of these threat actors in these campaigns? And we're starting sharing that automatically as well. So there are leaps and bounds in automation, in machine learning, and helping the analyst get to answers quicker. But for the bigger questions of what does this mean in our context, in our risk acceptance level, etc., we have to still use humans. AI aren't quite there yet. They're really good at automating and really good at machine learning. But then as we start asking more questions about stuff it doesn't know, we need a human in the loop. This changes quickly. But at the moment, through my PhD, I'm looking at how AI can help us do intelligence and decision support better. And at the moment, it can't. It can summarize quite a bit. If it has the data in a database and you give it sources, you can actually get really good answers from that. But when something new happens, you don't have the data. What will happen in 3 years? You don't know. If whatever decision you will make in 6 months or 6 years, we have to make assessments based on history, but also based on the data we know now, and then extrapolate and make assumptions, but also make scenarios, alternative scenarios. And at the moment, AI isn't quite there yet. I mean, it's far from it, but still, yeah.
Very interesting. AI is it's coming full speed ahead. AI agents are starting to come to get adopted, and it's just becoming more and more advanced. And also, I feel like many people maybe take more of a ad hoc approach maybe to cyber threat intelligence. They read different kind of sources and they guesstimate some kind of risk out of that. But it sounds like your approach is very methodical and it's very, yeah, very structured. You also mentioned something, or I actually read on your website about structured analytic training. What is that concept, and how do you view analysis? How do you do that in a good way?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, right, we had the 4 steps and analysis, which in the traditional sense was processing, but that's analysis. In analysis, there's a subpart called SATs, Structured Analytical Techniques. That is a set of techniques, maybe 60 or so, in a book written by Randy Fearson with PH. And he gathered from 20 years of his time in the CIA. He spent many years afterwards, as he retired, to gather and write a book that collected a set of analytical techniques. The whole point of using SATs is to externalize your thinking, and also by discussing with other people. There is no use of using an SAT alone, usually, specifically if you're using it to reduce bias. Now, a bias is something you bring with you, your experience or your inclination to think something. Hey, it's always this group or it's always this country, rather than looking at the evidence and then being critical to it. Critical thinking is about externalizing your thinking and then having other people's critiquing it in the terms of, have you thought about this? What about this? What are alternative explanations for this? So it's divided into multiple families, how you explore alternatives, how you do different types of analysis, how you do what's called a key assumption check, i.e., every time we make a statement, or every time we have a question, or every time we can't come to some sort of agreement, there is assumptions made. We assume that this connects with that. We assume that this is a underlying force for that. Assumptions aren't bad, but we have to make sure that we identify our key assumptions. If these assumptions should fall or fail, what does that do with our analysis and conclusion? And those are really good input to a collection plan, where we should collect more data and more information and knowledge on these assumptions, so we can ensure that we're not being surprised, if you will, by these assumptions falling or failing. And what we've seen in the cyber communities in the Nordics, and also now lately in Northern Europe, is that more and more mature CTI professionals who have spent 5 years or 10 years even within cyber, and worked with the CTI for many, many years now, are seeing, and also going back to what I said before, management and other parts of the organization are asking different questions than they're used to. You can't run around with the malware analysis or log analysis anymore. You actually have to learn how to do intelligence. So there are multiple options to do training. So in SANS, we have the FOR CTI course. Sorry, the FOR 587. I can't remember now, but it's the CTI training. So that's a 6-day course. I think 2 or 3 days are intelligence methodology, and 2 or 3 days are applying it for cyber specifically. You use the diamond model, the kill chain, etc. to do analysis, and you learn the tradecraft. But that's at the technical level. When you want a higher level, you usually go through what we started with, which is SAT training, which is learning about biases, learning about critical thinking, learning about identifying your bias, and also using then SATs to externalize everything, and then work together as a team of maybe 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people and work through a problem. Now, a lot of the discussions we have, well, we don't have time to it, or, there's too much stuff going on. Yes, at the technical, tactical level, you're right. Continue doing what you're doing. But at the higher level, when you get more questions that are forward in the horizon rather than right now or what happened before, we need to look at alternative ways of thinking. We need to ensure that we don't fall into our biases. We don't make wrong assessments and wrong decisions on supporting our clients, if you will. So there's a ton of, one I mentioned was the SANS CTI course, and there's another course called IAP, so Intelligence Analysis Analyst Professional, and that's actually by Fearson, the book I mentioned called Structure Analytical Techniques, and he actually started a training program where people can come in and learn. That course is 11 days. So as I said, a SANS course is 6 days, but this course is 11 days divided over 3 parts, where you're really diving into, and it's actually tied into cyber. So the type of training I teach is the training by Fearson, and we're teaching how to do intelligence for cyber people. We're using cyber scenarios at the higher level and learning about the biases and how to reduce them, how to do decision support, how to externalize the thinking, how to do critical thinking, etc. So it's actually really, really interesting and fun to do, because most of the time in day 7 or 8, they go, that's how it should be done, right? So it's fun to see when they get that light bulb moment.
Yeah, there's probably. I think many people might find it hard to learn CTI. I think CTI, it's mentioned a lot when you get into cybersecurity. Maybe if you go into technical cybersecurity, CTI is maybe it's just a part of the defending an organization. But really understanding the depth of the field is, I can understand that that's an eye opener for people. It's been really interesting to hear. And you mentioned something about starting to get interested in this field somewhat because of your interest in terrorism and maybe radicalism. What happens? How do people become or turn to terrorism? How was your journey after that, further moving towards CTI, and what really sparked your interest in this field?
I think what really interests me is to support those who are working on incidents with what we call basic intelligence, so they can understand the threat actor, their motivations, and also their previous activities. What are the previous TTPs? What are the previous behaviors we've seen? What are the detection rules are out there, so we can help the incident responders and also the tactical CTI analysts to a Norwegian term, komme til skudd, to get to the decision as quickly as possible and quicker by having basic intelligence ready and also supporting them on collecting and analysis and also being the voice of, are we sure? What are our biases? Or when you say this, I hear that you're very biased against or towards. And then we can have good discussions. Well, what I'm saying is this, and that's connected to this, and that's okay, but that's very lopsided. What are the alternative explanations? Could it be, oh, yes, of course, it could be, and then there's a long list of alternative explanations. Well, have you explored them? I think that's sort of where what gives me energy, and having those discussions, supporting the CTI analyst and incident responders, but also supporting the chief risk officer and the CISO in solving the bigger problems or the bigger issues of an organization that actually drives decision to improve cybersecurity for the organization. That those are really, I love doing that.
You mentioned two certifications. You mentioned one from SANS and another one. What was that called again?
That's called the IAP, so the Intelligence Analyst Professional. Yeah.
Hmm. If there are anyone listening to this podcast who really are interested in this field or want to learn more about it, what kind of resources, what kind of certifications maybe, what kind of path would you recommend people check out to learn more and see if this field could be something that they would like to get more into?
Yeah, so I guess we touched upon this already, right? So the SANS course, not everyone can afford a SANS course. They're pretty pricey. So they usually have an employer would be beneficial to do that. From a technical perspective, I mean, Google. Figure out who to follow. Go on LinkedIn and X and figure out who to follow and learn from them. There's a ton of resources that you can go on GitHub and actually Google search there as well, where you have awesome collection of CTI or awesome collection of intelligence or awesome collection of whatever topic you're interested in. And then there are multiple blogs, articles, books that you can read to learn about your field. So one field is a technical to do the incident response over to CTI to do more analysis, but still supporting incidents, or do more strategic and more decision support and more methodology. Both of them are available, and there are a bunch of people that you can follow. Of course, you can follow me on LinkedIn, Freddy Murray, Murre, and then you can. I publish a lot about intelligence, I publish a lot about cyber threat intelligence, and as I go through my PhD, more about how AI can support. But that'll be in a couple of years down the road. And also post about trainings and other stuff that might be relevant, right? So, and also get involved. Don't be a lurker. Don't be a shadow person and sit online and just follow. Join in the conversation. Be part of the solution. Figure out ways to solve problems. That is a good way to be noticed and also get job offers. So don't apply for a job and nobody knows who you are. Then there are multiple events that you can go to and get to know other people. In Norway, we have a Discord called Norsec, NORSEC, and in Denmark, we have something called a VSEC. And there are probably other services that you can go to where you can meet CTI people, meet incident responders, meet cybersecurity people, and they're discussing, what's in the news, questions they get from, other constituents or stakeholders around them. So get involved, irrespective of your focus, if it's technical or if it's strategic or operational. Get involved. figure out where to go. Google, ask people, connect with people, comment, be part of the community, and that means you will learn more. But there's a ton of books, so go to GitHub, look for awesome and whatever field they're focusing on, and you'll get a ton of resources to look into. And there's also a lot of resources in different blogs. Again, just Google. So for CTI, for instance, Katie Nichols is a fantastic person to follow, and she has created a collection of awesome CTI stuff. And you have a bunch of blog posts, a bunch of presentations that she has gathered from different people, YouTube, and also podcasts, and also, of course, books and other resources. So she has created a series, actually, of, if you're total beginner, more intermediate, or advanced, there are different sources that you can focus on. So I would highly recommend that.
That's the thing that I love about the cyber community. It's just so open. There's so much excellent free information sharing, just I guess paying it forward a lot. So yeah, there's definitely room for everyone, and this probably applies to this field as well, that anyone can learn it as long as they have the guts and the willpower and the interest to keep going.
I agree.
So you work for the Nordic Financial CERT. It's an organization that's owned by the Nordic financial sector. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. That's a non-profit, so we're not in it for the money. We're supporting the finance sector. They own us and tell us what to focus on and do. Yeah.
So you definitely have a lot of very interesting insights. You can maybe you could share some of it with us. I understand if some of it is confidential, but how does the threat landscape look like for the financial sector in the Nordics?
So the threat landscape is actually really interesting. I've been doing what's called a GTL, a Generic Threat Landscape Report, for 5 years now. And every year every month, every week, we write the blogs and updates and manage cases, etc. We summarize everything in Q reports, quarterly threat assessments, and then all of that trickles up to what we call the GTL, the Generic Threat Landscape Report. That's where we try to first identify the most relevant threat actors and the relevant threats in terms of malwares and other stuff that can actually be the threat actors are using, and the TTPs and the behaviors over time, and then look at what are the most relevant, who are actually trying and who are actually succeeding, who are the most advanced, who have, so we're looking in what's called proximity, who has tried to breach the finance sector or, the supply chain or third party, either successful or unsuccessful. And also a recency in terms of did it happen 6 years ago, 6 weeks ago, 6 days ago, and all those. There's a ton of attributes that we're looking for to prioritize and identify the most relevant threats, threat actors, and also malwares and other things that are the tools they're using, and then build out all the TTPs and all the different detection rules we can based off of this intelligence. And a key aspect here is that this report is not meant for the technical people, it's meant for the decision makers higher up in the organization. I forgot to say one thing though. A key aspect, as I've been saying, intelligence is decision support. Decision support is for anyone making a decision that we're supporting. It's in the words, right? But a lot of people think that decision support is only for management or higher ups. No, I can support you in deciding whether or not you should block this IP, or whether or not this email is malicious, or if this attachment is malicious. Those decisions are at lower level, while decisions higher up in organizations have different types of questions with different types of horizon, if you will, in terms of time. But it's all decision support. Now, going back to the type of reporting or the threat landscape, we see a pretty stable threat landscape. There was a lot of changes around the invasion of Ukraine, because a lot of the threat groups had Russian and Ukrainian people in the same groups. So they started arguing and they started doxing each other. So there was a lot of changes and a lot of stuff that we had to try and keep tabs on. But after a year or two, that sort of leveled out. So now we see a pretty stable threat landscape again. We see the same malwares used. They as law enforcement takes stuff down, the new pops up that we've been tracking for a couple of weeks or months or years already. And then someone quits and, hey, we're going to stop. But then they reappear 2 weeks later with a new name, but with the same TTPs. So there's a lot of changes, but still it's pretty stable. We also track certain nation states, and when you read threat reports or threat assessment from government entities, like in Norway we have the PSD, the secret police, or the army intelligence, and also the national security authority. They publish all their reports and publish them almost simultaneously, but they all say the same things as the Center for Cybersecurity Denmark, Center for Cybersecurity, no, sorry, the National Cybersecurity in Sweden and in Finland. They all focus on sort of the same threats, if you will, in terms of nations. And then we focus on the specific threats to the finance sector. And as I said, it's pretty stable, but I'm not going to talk too much about who we're tracking and why, etc. So that's sort of our little, secret. But we share this with all the different sector CERTs across the Nordics, and also with government entities, and also with other CERTs across Northern Europe that we have a connection with. So there's a lot of good communities out there, like Curated Intelligence, which is run by Bushido, and it's a really good community with all the really high-level analysts collaborating, sharing reports and analysis and other stuff. So there's a lot of good communities out there.
You mentioned something about both Russians and Ukrainians being involved in a lot of these threat actor groups. From what I've heard, there's a huge ecosystem out there within these groups. You have initial access brokers, for example, that specialize in gaining an initial foothold into an organization, for example. You have ransomware operators that deploy the malware, the ransomware, and so on. So how do you view this ecosystem? How does it work? And has it really changed these last years since COVID?
Oh, that's interesting because okay, I have to remember, yes. So one of the things I mentioned before, why I said we have the MITRE table and we have the cyber kill chain. One of the things we do, and I mentioned just quickly before, is we use what's called a unified kill chain. That unified kill chain is divided into three phases: is in, through, and out. So basically trying to breach a system and gaining a foothold on an endpoint, and then pivoting through the network to elevate and escalate the privileges, but also introducing more backdoors, and then also identifying the crown jewels to exfiltrate. And if you then, well, now we're moving into the actions on objective, to finding the right data or whatever you're looking for, the threat actors, I mean, and then exfiltrating the data. And if they're collaborating with a ransom group, they would also then, a ransomware group, they would then encrypt the data. So going back to the in. In is where we have what we call IAGs, initial access groups. Those are the ones we call breaching crews or breach groups. They are the ones that are specializing in breaching and entering systems. They run, collaborate with, or buy botnet services, phishing services, malware as a service. We have malware as a service, phishing as a service, botnet as a service. There's a bunch of things that they can buy or manage on their own to breach. Then they will either sell access to someone they collaborate with, or use what's called an IAB, an initial access broker. The brokerage, which is the term here, is gaining a lot of access, then putting it up on a system where you as a threat actor can filter and say, I want servers or endpoints or cameras, and I want them in this region. I want the operating system to be this, and I want the number of servers or number of clients in that network to be above 10,000, for instance. You can filter a lot through that. So that's what the threat actors are using the IABs for. They do not breach, they do not pivot, they are just a service to help those who have gained access to sell their access to other groups. Now, the groups in the middle, usually, they are not usually the ones that are doing the breaching, but there are groups that are doing both. But mostly we have different groups that are doing, multiple groups, I mean, that are doing the breaching, and then multiple groups that are doing the pivoting. So the through part, the pivoting, that's where we see either a group that are only collaborating with a breach group or collaborating closely with a ransom group. Now we're separating ransom from ransomware. Ransom is holding something on for ransom because they stole your data, or you're DDoSing the heck out of a system, and I'm demanding money for that to stop, or for you to get access or get your data back, or I'm deleting the data so I don't have it anymore. A ransomware group, they are doing the collaborating with the pivoting crews to encrypt the data after you have exfiltrated them. Right now, we see that there is a split between groups that are only stealing data and then demanding money, and groups that are exfiltrating data and encrypting. And we see more of a balance now. Before it was only stealing and encrypting. Now it's more of a balance between stealing and encrypting and only stealing. So that's sort of the steps. So we use these ways of telling a story of which threat actors are relevant to breach your systems. You should really know about them, how the TTPs, and you should be able to detect and respond to them. And then you should be able to detect and respond to a completely different set of threat actors with different sets of TTPs and different sets of behavior. And then again, if you're focusing on ransom groups or ransomware groups, you are out of luck. If you only focus on them, you should have been able to stop them before they pivoted, and you should have been able to stop them before they breached your system. So focusing on ransom groups is a fool's errand. Yes, it's irrelevant in some cases, but most of the time you should have detected them as you got the first email, or they tried to exploit a vulnerability, or they were trying to log in because they have stolen or your credential, or trying to brute force a credential. That's when you needed to stop them, not when they call you because they've stolen your data. That's way, way, way too late. Having intelligence on them so you know how to deal with those guys when you do negotiations makes sense, but it's way too late from a defensive and detection perspective. And that's where intelligence comes in, right? That's the part we need to work harder on, and figuring out how can we prepare and be better prepared to towards those threat actors and the changes they make in their tactics, techniques, and behaviors over time. So yeah, that's I get excited now because I really enjoy doing these things.
Yeah, it's just a crazy world out there with the huge marketplaces, as you say, with just filtering exactly what kind of access you want to acquire, and yeah, they're really sophisticated. And some of these groups they run like professional organizations, right, with like HR departments and everything. It's super, yeah, it's so strange, but they're
Hmm.
professionals, I guess. So the DORA regulation is coming from the EU now.
Oh yes.
It's been implemented in the EU. It's coming to Norway as well. And a part of the DORA regulation is this methodology called the TIBER, or threat intelligence. What's the
So actually, DORA dictates something called TLPT, which is threat-led penetration testing. TIBER is something that's still in use, and TLPT and TIBER sort of balance each other out right now. So DORA requires you to do TLPT tests, and TIBER is a way to do it. It's a framework how to do threat intelligence-based ethical red teaming. That's the TIBER acronym. So that TIBER is something that was, well, DORA, TIBER, TLPT, all of those things are finance sector specific. It's set up, so TIBER is run or maintained by the European Central Bank. And all the central banks are running some sort shape, oh, well, not all, a lot of the European banks, sorry, the European central banks across Europe are running some sort of TLPT or TIBER tests these days. And because of DORA coming now, it isn't, before it was, you could do a TIBER test if you wanted to, we can't force you. But with DORA it says, if you are a critical part of financial stability in your country, you have to be tested every X amount of years. And you have to do a really thorough test, which is described through the TLPT and also, or alternatively through TIBER. So TIBER is basically what they're doing, but you can also do like a TLPT test as well. But fundamentally, they're doing the same things. And these are really exciting times because this is actually really rigorously testing the detection and defensive capabilities of organizations, not just pen testing a system or pen testing a internet exposed service. They're testing all of those things, but also the human side, the social engineering, the how they're moving through the networks and detection, and there's a really elaborate testing scheme which I'm really fond of working with, and I'm usually part of these teams that are planning and running them, without blue team's knowledge that these tests are going. And also, we at NFCERT get these cases sometimes, and I have to be careful to tell the team what goes on. But sometimes I see, hey, I know this test is going on in this organization, and now we're getting cases about the reporting of what they're seeing and malware they detected and behaviors, etc. And the team is supporting them like they should, and I have to stay in the back and say, well, I don't know, I've never seen that group before in my life. So, but the point is, they're identifying the relevant threat actors. That's the GTL report I talked about before that we're giving to the finance sector. That's the baseline and starting point. And then they select one or two or three threat actors, create scenarios with certain aspects they need to do and certain flags, and then run it through maybe a couple of months. So this isn't a 2-day, 2-week, let's see how much we can hammer this organization. They're slowing everything down and actually taking the time like a threat actor would do. And then once they get inside, they speed up and go for the gold type of thing. So it's really exciting to work with because you really see and learn so much more about the detection and response capabilities. They're really getting tested. So yeah, it's valuable for sure.
It's very cool, all of the different functions coming together. And TLPT also includes like purple teaming as well, right? So you have the red team, the purple team, the red team, and then the white team as well. So yeah, really cool, really like a structured exercise across a lot of different functions within technical cybersecurity.
Yeah, absolutely. So the control team is usually who runs everything, right? It's those are the ones who plan everything. That's usually where I am. And then, as you said, the red team and blue team, once everything is done, they go back and they replay. That's the purple team part. I'm doing this. Are you seeing it? No, we're not seeing it. Can you do it? Oh, now we saw it. Okay. They learn so much more about all the steps that happened and what they did and how they got access. That's walking through everything, but actually is checking what can you see, what can't you see, and then replaying stuff. That's really, really valuable in terms of preparing for an actual event in the future, because you get undressed, so to speak. You really get undressed, and all the mistakes are getting pointed at, right? This didn't work, this didn't work, this didn't work, and the list goes on and on and on sometimes. But there are so much lessons identified that you have to turn into lessons learned, where they're actually doing stuff better, changing their detection, changing their logging, changing how they respond to certain events.
It's super exciting, as you say. And a lot of the investments that are driven into cybersecurity nowadays, they are probably compliance based or based through these regulations, especially in the EU. There's a lot of regulations coming in. But and this is expensive, right? Good threat intelligence people are, it's an expensive thing. It's the same as with blue teams and red teams and so on. So how do you explain the need for these services and maybe cyber threat intelligence specifically to management and to executives in an organization in a way that they understand?
Yeah, look, so you're right. Anything for cybersecurity, incident responders, CTI people, it's an expensive part of detecting and responding to incidents. Is this for the small 1, 2, 10, 15 people organization? Perhaps not. It depends on the type of organization and the value that they're sort of defending or protecting, and if they can afford it or not. I wouldn't say that if you're a really small organization or not part of critical functions, then you really should just do the basics. So the NSM in Norway, the National Security Authority, they've created like a list of minimum requirements that you should really have in place. And if you can start there and do that, that's a really, really good start. Well, when we think about the ROI here, defending the value of having someone like me, you really, really need to have a mature organization, I think. At least have someone who knows their stuff, have the right background with the right skills and the right mindset. Being an analyst requires to be analytical, right? It's not for everyone, I would say. And another part here is that before you go to the step of hiring someone, can you buy it? Do you need to build it and have it on your own? Can you buy the services? You can have really good packages and services from different local, in your country, local organizations that will supply you with a SOC, 24/7 SOC, or instant responders that will deal with something within X amount of hours, etc. There's so many things you can do with an MSSP, for instance, a managed security service provider. You can, of course, have all those things at your fingertips. But then again, as you mature and you're bigger and you have more revenue to defend it, you can. But then going back to your question, the ROI, what is the return of investment? And that goes partially into the intelligence paradox, right? You're right because you're wrong. Nothing happens because we do our job. That's one part of it. The big part then is the end of the intelligence cycle. I talked about feedback. That part is all about measuring the value. It's all about demonstrating and figuring out what have we done with intelligence, with the decision support, with the reducing of uncertainty. What did the stakeholders actually do with the information, data, intelligence we gave them? And then what is the value in their mind? If they don't see the value, the next time they're cutting budgets, you're out. The next time they're thinking, should we buy this service or hire that person to build something, they will, 10 out of 10, buy whatever's cheapest. But so that means we really have to demonstrate value, and that's why that last point, that feedback part, is immensely important. And I think most people who do CTI or incident response or cybersecurity for that matter, who do not understand that you have to demonstrate value outside of, but I blocked 700 IPs, or we were attacked 1 million times last year. No, you were not. You were scanned 700,000 times. You weren't attacked 700,000 times. So we need to demonstrate, we need to do more. Numbers and statistics are fine. Demonstrating value requires a bigger a different way of thinking. So, and that's a huge part of understanding intelligence rather than focusing on cyber. It doesn't matter how many cases you closed or how fast you closed them. It's about managing the threat level and keeping it at a level that is lower than the risk associated with it, so it doesn't actually flow over or you result in being breached without being able to detect and respond to it. Someone pivoting in, and that means in the real world it's not one person, it's maybe 2, 3, 4 different groups coming in and figuring out if your organization that they have access to now is worth it for them. And there's a lot of information, a lot of noise they're creating. So it's all about figuring out what is the level you need to be at to be able to detect and respond to the most relevant threats to you. So maybe start with an analysis from a company coming in and saying, hey, for you don't need this. You should focus on the minimum requirements from NSM. Or maybe you should have like a SOC person or like an incident responder, perhaps. But being what we call like with a finger in the earth, grounded, we call it in English, more being realistic with the actual threat level to that organization versus the funding and money and the value, funding and money and the value that they actually get from it. And those need to either equal each other out, or you have to be able to have a lower cost than you actually benefits you're getting. But that goes back to how can we demonstrate value and ROI. That was a long-winded answer, but you get the idea.
That was a great answer, and I mean, I feel I've learned a lot through this conversation. So it's been very interesting. Just to leave off, I'm interested to hear more about your organization, Intelligence Tradecraft. What is Intelligence Tradecraft, and what do you guys do there, and what do you deliver?
So Intel Tradecraft is sort of my little thing, as I said initially. It's we do consultancy, we do training. Most of my time goes into doing training or hosting workshops or helping organizations build their own program the intelligence program, or adjust and adapt and improve their existing intelligence process, and also help them figure out how to generate good intelligence products that actually demonstrate value to whoever they're supporting. That's usually what I do there. And as I said, that my part, so not part, the fun part here is that my day job at NFCERT, my PhD research, and my own company, it's everything is intertwined, and I'm doing what I love. I love to do research. I love to do intelligence analysis. I love to do teaching and training, and everything is combined into sort of a hobby. Usually they say if you work with what you love, you don't work a day in your life. No, it's actually wrong. If you work with what you love, you have no spare time at all because you continuously work with what you love. So that's sort of my lot in life, I guess.
Very nice. I guess it's the concept of work-life integration instead of work-life balance.
Oh, I try to balance it off, and my significant other is keeping me honest and making sure that I don't spend too much time having fun in front of the computer, but get out and be social as well.
Well, this has been really, really nice. Thank you so much, Freddie, for coming on the podcast and sharing your knowledge.
You're welcome, and thank you for having me. And enjoy. If anyone wants to reach out, just follow me on LinkedIn.
The LinkedIn is the best place to find you.
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you so much, and I'll see you later.
See ya. Bye.